And now it's time for the GeoGeeks, our regular segment where we bring in a subject matter expert to tell us what's new and interesting in one of the core ArcGIS products.
Today we welcome the original GIS geek, Chris North. He is the director of the technology adoption team at Esri Canada and also happens to be the person who approves our timesheets. He's joining us from Toronto. Hello, Chris. Thank you for coming and joining us today.
Maggie, listen, this is great. I'm here with my favorite GIS person, and Mark. So,
you know I can hear you, right?
Hi, guys. How are you doing?
Pretty fantastic.
Yeah, we're good. We're excited to have you here with us on our very first episode of the new podcast.
Yes, I am very excited about this too. I'm really looking forward to this, hearing what you guys have done. I've heard lots about it so far. Really looking forward to it.
hopefully all good stuff. But we definitely wanted to have you on the very first episode because this segment of our show is named in your honor. The GeoGeeks are named for the original GIS geek. And I haven't been around the company to know all the lore, but maybe you can share with us sort of why you're the GIS geek.
Why am I the GIS geek? Well, Mark has certainly been around the company long enough to know the lore. So Maggie, I'll tell you what the story goes. It comes from the fact that my license plate for my car is GIS geek. And there's a very funny story behind that I've told many times. I've had that license plate for 15 years, 16 years now. It was a birthday present from my, at that time, two very young daughters. And the story goes that I was sitting there at this sort of Norman Rockwell moment in the big armchair with my two young daughters on either side of me. And they give me this big, you can picture how a box that's been wrapped by a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old, right? It's just bows everywhere. And I open this thing up, and there's the Ontario license plate that says GIS Geek. And I was just, my face lit up. And I looked at my wife and said, is this real? And she looked at me with that look of disappointment that, yes, hon, it's real. And then without thinking, I said, I can't believe it was available. To which my wife replied, I can believe it was available. So from that day forward, I have been known as the GIS geek. And it's, I get emails every once in a while. I saw you driving down the 404 the other day. I'm thinking, oh my, what did I do? And I went, oh yeah, GIS geek license plate. So so that is the name has stuck over the years. So yeah,
and it's aptly named too because you are the ultimate GIS geek. So
don't know about that. I don't know. When you introduce this segment as a subject matter expert, we better be careful which subject we pick, Mark, because I don't know. We'll see how it goes.
Well, were you the subject matter expert when you went to Palm Springs recently? So I guess the Esri Developer Summit happened a few weeks ago. What did you see or hear when you were at the DevSum?
Okay, great segue. So there's an area where I'm absolutely not the subject matter expert, but sending me to a developer conference was great. I have to confess, a lot of it I just watched and said, that's really cool. I have no idea what they're doing, but boy, that looks really cool. It was great. I've been going to the Developer Summit since its inaugural year. I think I'm guessing now 2003, 2004. It's been going for quite some time, and I really enjoy going to. I enjoy the user conference. I enjoy the Developer Summit because it really is kind of that deep dive. And what's really interesting is, the Developer Summit, it's not just for the hardcore coding side of it. Definitely it's there. It's really, I like to think of it more as it's the event to go to for extending the ArcGIS platform. So it's not just developers, it's scripting and it's configuring. So there's stuff there that, there's the .NET deep development, people building their own applications. But there's also the arcade and the Python, the people who are extending and working with the ArcGIS out of the box tools, but maybe just, using Python to string together a couple of those, existing tools and do something. So that's the part I tend to drive into and really, really pay attention to for me, because I'm not one of those deep .NET developers, but I do spend a lot of time with things like Python and Arcade, extending and configuring the system. Was really interesting this year, the focus on all the new services they talked about. The two things that really jumped out for me along those lines was the focus on content, and there was a lot of focus on things like the new data services that are available and enrichment services that are available. They announced a new places and points of interest feature service, which was really, really interesting. So a lot of focus on the Living Atlas, like the community map stuff, that focus on content, because you need that content. And I think the platform is really maturing in the way that it provides that content. Also, the other thing that really leapt out at me was so much of what they did this year at the Developer Summit. The examples that they used were all around analytics and spatial analysis and whatnot, and that this using the tool to answer these really difficult questions, which I thought was really interesting. And again, there too, there was a lot of what I call the deep dive stuff, that deep learning, the machine learning stuff, where they were doing really interesting things to, feature extraction and feature identification with those deep learning tools, but also just the lighter weight analytical tools, so that you can do really interesting things even in simple lightweight applications. So for me, I was fascinated by the notion that, okay, we're building a lightweight application that does a really sophisticated spatial analysis, but I as a developer and my users are really shielded from that sophistication, because now not only do we have map services that says, here's the data, we've got all of these analytical services that says, well, here's the answer to your question. So I thought that was just mind-blowing down there this year, that the focus on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a focus on analysis is really exciting for me too. I know that, answering that question and doing that analysis made me fall in love with geography and GIS as well. So great to hear that there's so much of an emphasis on that. And, being there and hearing all those discussions, what do you think is really driving that focus on analytics now?
Well, so we're definitely into the Chris's opinion part of the program here. Mm-hmm. I personally think that what's driving this focus on analytics and answering these deep questions is fundamentally people are starting to recognize that, and I know this sounds such a pontificating thing to say, but so many of the problems that you see on the news, read about, or you watch the videos and hear about, I believe that the solutions to those problems lie not entirely in looking at using geography, but I don't think we're going to solve those problems effectively without geography and without considering location, without considering space. So there's the obvious climate change, right? Geopolitical stuff, but then there's the less obvious things, the issues around economy. Everybody's all up in arms right now about food prices in the grocery store. That's fun. Yes, that is an issue of how do you balance corporate profits with affordability, but there's also a huge supply chain element to that, and how do you understand that and improve that without geography? So you take all that recognition and you realize that, okay, we need to analyze this stuff, and there's this undercurrent of data science that everybody keeps talking about right now. We hear about data analytics, and everybody's all, getting excited about, chat GPT and artificial intelligence is going to take over the world. I don't think artificial intelligence is going to take over the world. I think artificial intelligence is going to give us tools to answer some of these difficult questions. And I really believe that we need the spatial data science needs to be part of that. So you put all that together, I think people are starting to realize that, I need to do more than just put dots on the map. I need to do more than just store the data. It's, as we often talk about, that a GIS isn't a system. It's three systems. It's the system of record, system of insight, system of engagement. And for me, that system of insight, that's a critical piece, right? Because we need to, there's an opportunity for us to understand what's going on. A lot of people are really excited about digital twins right now. You read about and hear about digital twins all over the place, and we just did a webinar on that back in January. And I think digital twins are very, very interesting. But when I look at it, I say, well, our GIS that we have been building for decades now have always been digital twins, right? So even the early GIS systems, which were, collecting and storing and analyzing all the data we could find about our forests or about our agricultural systems, they were a digital twin of the forest. Our planning geodatabase and our parcel fabric and our street network is a digital twin of our city, right? And we've been doing that for decades, right? So it's not to say that we don't need digital twins. I love the fact that people are starting to talk in those terms. It's an opportunity for us in GIS to say, it's a kind of a polite, I told you so, but it's great. Now that everybody's thinking that way, let's put GIS in that light, right? So that everybody can really, really start to reap the full benefits of GIS, and not just think of it as, oh, those are the mapping guys, in the mapping room down the hall, and they make maps. No, I think now we can think of it as, those are the people in the GIS group that are building a digital twin of our ... our city, our organization, our forest, our climate, our ecosystem, and they're analyzing that. They're giving us insights into that. They're sharing and collaborating, what they have found with that, and taking that input and feeding it back in. So that's why I think that there's kind of this focus on that.
That's really interesting. And I know in the past you've talked to us about this idea of a task GIS, and it's sort of shifting towards a question GIS. I really want to kind of peel that onion a little bit more. So tell us a bit more about what you mean by that concept and this shift towards that direction.
Yeah, another Chris Northism. You guys, I mean, I really feel for you guys. You guys have to suffer through this day in and day out. So what the heck does it mean, a task GIS versus a question GIS? I think part and parcel of this shift right now is I'm seeing kind of an inflection point where we thought of a GIS as a technical system that did tasks. It stored data, it answered, we talked about queries and data layers, and we used this kind of task-like and very technical terms to describe this thing. And now it's more, when I say a question-based GIS, I'm now starting to see people realize, a GIS is something that I can ask a question of, right? And I can get an answer to that. So it doesn't mean that we don't need to worry about storing and tuning our databases. It doesn't mean that we don't need to worry about optimizing our queries. It's a different way of thinking about the role of GIS, not as something that's an engine chugging away, waiting to respond to a query, but rather a system of systems that is ready to help us answer questions that we might ask about that digital twin of our ecosystem or our city or our forest or our organization. And so I think that changes our mind shift from, okay, I need to think of my GIS not in terms of the size of data that I'm going to store and the number of queries that I'm going to respond to and the number of users that are going to be accessing it, but I need to think about what are the kinds of questions that my GIS are going to be asked. And I like to think of that in that maturity level that you guys have always seen me talk about. The sort of 4 levels of the sort of the types of analytics. These 4 maturity levels are there's descriptive analytics, there's diagnostic analytics, there is predictive analytics, and that there is prescriptive analytics. And this isn't unique to Esri. That lots of organizations talk in these terms. You can Google those 4 types of analytics. You'll find all kinds of things on it. But for me, that's an increasingly maturing level of question that I ask of the GIS. It's relatively easy to ask what happened. That's responding to a query. Where are my fire hydrants? Where are my things? What has happened? Where were the accidents on my road network? Whoop, you get an answer. That's descriptive analytics. You say, oh, okay. But then you kind of do okay, so what? Well, why are there more accidents here than there are over here? And that's where you get into things like looking at the correlation between these things. Well, gee, we're having a lot of this kind of, these fire hydrants are failing more in this area than in this area, and GIS is really good at saying, and there's a difference in the soil type or the things like that. Again, you were the one who called me a subject matter expert, not me. So GIS has always been very good at that descriptive, and it's always been very good at that diagnostic, layering things on top of each other, these aha moments of spatial correlation between these things, right? For me, we now need to move to those next 2, which is, and that's where what is going to happen, that predictive analytics, where we start to say, okay, well, if this trend continues, this is going to happen. Now you're bringing in time into the, now you're dealing not only in X and Y and Z, but you're dealing with T as well. You're now bringing that time element into it. What is going to happen if this trend continues? But the last one that's most exciting is that prescriptive. What should we do? Right? It's what should we do about this phenomenon? Given that this has happened because of this, and this will continue to happen, what do we want to do? Let it keep happening because it's a good thing, or do we need to do something to make it change because it's a bad thing, right? And that's really that's why I call it a question GIS as opposed to a task GIS.
Yeah, it definitely, I can see what you're saying about that, like question GIS, answering those questions and having those different types of analytics and thinking beyond just the basics. There's so much to know and think about when you're sort of imagining spatial analytics, thinking about data science. So much for our listeners to understand. But since you're here as our expert on the topics, we just want to know if you can only remember, if people only take away or remember 3 things about this subject, what would you want them to take with them today and remember?
Oh boy. 3 things to take away. I think so some things that jump to mind, and I really think it. So back to the very first thing we talked about, where we started down this trail on the developer summit. I think one takeaway is we've got to stop it. For those people who are thinking this way, I would encourage them to stop thinking of analytics as being something that is complex or hard. It doesn't have to be. That's one of the reasons why I like that, think of your GIS as a question box, because asking questions aren't hard. We're all, let's be honest, we're all playing with Chat GPT right now. We've all got to do a presentation. We've all got to write something. We ask GPT and we get an answer. We need to go to a place where that's how we think of interacting with our GIS. I'm just gonna ask it some questions. Now, we don't yet have a nice Chat GPT interface to our GIS. I'm sure there's some really smart people somewhere working on that. But these tools aren't that hard. Doing machine learning things sounds so science fiction and so new and so scary, but it's not. If any of us in our GIS 101 courses at college and university ever did a supervised classification of a Landsat image, guess what? You used machine learning tools. That is machine learning. All the pixels in here look like this, and we told the software that is a swimming pool. So all it's doing? It's just going and finding other clusters of pixels that happen to look the same and have the same combinations. And I think these are swimming pools too. Like this stuff isn't. It's not. It's not sort of Isaac Asimov kind of science fiction stuff. It's really just. It's really just. Roll up your sleeves and start to ask your GIS questions, and don't be afraid of these things. You don't have to be some deep learning writer of complicated Python code to leverage this stuff. Use the geoprocessing tools, which have got a user interface. Fill in the blanks and hit the go button, right? I guess it's called a run button, and it shows you how much I use the software these days, right? So don't be afraid of it, I think is the first thing that I would like to say to everyone to take away. The other thing, the other takeaway is shift your thinking about, we think in terms of tasks and jobs, and we need to, and I want to be crystal clear because I always get into trouble here. We still need to think in terms of the tasks. We still need to, I'm not saying we can give up maintaining our GIS. That's not what we're trying to do. But I think I would like people, when they're setting out and looking at their GIS and want to grow their GIS, like I said a little earlier, think about the size and the type of the data, and think about the speed and the responses that you want, and think about the numbers, but also think about the questions that you're trying to answer, right? What problem are we trying to solve here? And that will translate into what questions do we want to answer. And you can use that 4-level, question, maturity level. Start with the simple questions with what has happened. Okay, now I know what happened. Well, why did it happen, right? Answer that question. Well, what's going to happen next? Well, let's answer that question. What should we do about it? Okay, answer that question. If you think of this simply as a series of questions to answer in the right order, again, it's not all that complicated. It's not all that hard to do, right? And the third thing I would suggest to everyone is go talk to others, right? We may not be able to think of all of the questions. I think our job as GIS professionals is to reach out to others in the organization and say, hey, Mark, what problems do you have, Mark?
So many.
So many. Mark has so many problems. What organizational challenges, Mark, do you face? And what questions would you like answers to, right? And get those questions and then say, okay, let's take it to our chat GIS, and well, let's ask this GIS these questions, right? And get the answers. And I think that for me is the future of GIS. It really is a critical part of an organization's information system. Every organization says we need a BI system. We need to do analytics within our group. And I really think that a lot of people think of GIS as kind of a subset or a specialization of analytics or BI. I'm biased, and I have a license plate. I turn it around. I think that spatial analytics is actually the superset. And some people make the mistake of ignoring that geographic element and that geographic thinking, and they do their analysis. And I think we need to get people to think, all right, you've got to really consider the geography here as well in a superset sense. I think if you're only looking at straight mathematical, R-squared correlation values on a X and Y axis, you're missing a big part of what's actually going on. And you'll find your answers to those 4 questions won't be as good if you don't consider that element.
Wow, that's a lot of food for thought there. So thank you so much, Chris, for coming by and being one of our first guests here in our Spatial Report podcast. So really appreciate all of the good advice, and let's do some analytics, hey?
Yeah, let's do it. Well, thank you. I am honored to be one of your first guests. And I'm quite sure, as Maggie said, it's not just because I approve timesheets, but also but I really do appreciate you guys having me on your first episode and just having me on in general. It's great. And I think this platform, this podcast platform is going to be great. And I'm really excited about where you guys are going to take this.
Thank you so much. As long as you don't fire us, that's the key.
Mark, I keep trying, but
I know.
What? Mark, I'm going to keep you around. There's so much paperwork involved, and I'm lazy, so I'll just keep you around.
Oh, that's amazing. All right, Chris North. He is the Director of Technology Adoption here at Esri Canada, and he joined us today from Toronto.